The number one thing that causes total stagnation in our homes, inaction. And the number one thing that causes inaction is emotion. Our feelings are the number one cause of procrastination. We feel overwhelmed. We talk ourselves out of doing things that we know are good for us, even if we really want to do them. We don't feel like it. It's overwhelming. There are a million other things that we would rather do instead, and blah. So today we're going to talk about how to change the emotional landscape here so that you not only make progress in your home, but hopefully you enjoy it, at least a little bit. The number one factor here is emotional readiness. A simple reframe can change everything. It can change how you feel about things. You can tell a story from one angle and someone's a villain, shift the lens and they're the hero. In one version, you're spiraling under the weight of all of your stuff, and in another, you're reclaiming your space and gaining agency. It's the same facts, the same items, entirely different story. That's the power of emotional readiness. It's not just about pretending that things are easier than they are. It's about adjusting the lens that you're looking through. And that shift can make the difference between something that feels crushing and something that feels like momentum. In cognitive psychology, this is often referred to as mental contrast and implementation intention. Researchers have found that simply imagining a positive outcome isn't enough. You also have to anticipate things like obstacles and rehearse your responses in advance to those things. That's how your brain builds the wiring to follow through even under pressure. So in other words, emotional readiness means mentally rehearsing resistance before it happens. One study found that people who used if-then plans, like if I feel overwhelmed, then I will take a 5-minute break, were far more likely to follow through with their goals, even in emotionally challenging situations. Another factor here is perceived control, the belief that you are steering the ship. Studies have found that people who feel a greater sense of control over their environment have lower stress and anxiety levels, even in difficult situations. So when you feel emotionally unprepared, decluttering can feel like something that's happening to you. But when you give yourself time to mentally and emotionally gear up, you regain a sense of that agency. That's what people really mean when they say, I just had to change my mindset. They're talking about building emotional capacity for the task ahead. When your brain has time to reframe and rehearse a different outcome, the emotional weight of that exact same situation changes. And that's exactly what emotional readiness does for decluttering. It gives your emotions room to process and calibrate before you are face to face with hard decisions, which are likely to come up at some point. But let's talk about situational coping, because while getting your mindset on board can make the exact same task feel completely different, our mindsets aren't built in a vacuum. They're shaped by something deeper, and that is context. So this is where situational coping comes in. It's one thing to feel emotionally prepared in general, but when you zoom out and you look at why you're decluttering, what's led you here, and how you feel about it, that's when the real emotional picture can come into focus, and you can get a little more granular in the details of what's happening and achieve emotional readiness quicker. Even if you've done the work to get into a good mindset, it can still feel like impossibly heavy if the situation surrounding your clutter and what's causing you to go through it is still emotionally charged. So there are 3 core parts of this emotional context. The first is the situation at large. This is your entry point. Why are you decluttering or downsizing, if that's the case? Are you doing it because you feel empowered to make a change? Or are you doing it because, something in your life forced you to make a change? There's a big difference between choosing to declutter after reading an inspiring book or something versus having to pack up your home after a major loss. The task might be similar, but your body, your nervous system, and your emotions are walking through 2 completely different realities. Even neutral life shifts, like changing a child's room as they grow, can stir up some complicated emotions. You're not just organizing, but you're saying goodbye to a chapter. So the situation is important. Number 2 is the result of the situation. Because of X, now Y is happening. So it's digging a little bit deeper into the context. So this could look like, because I'm retiring, I'm moving into a smaller house. Because I'm getting divorced, I can't afford to keep all of this stuff. Because I got a new job, I'm moving across the country and I want to travel light. You see what I'm saying? Like, the situation matters, but the result of the situation is also important. How you feel about that result makes a difference, because if the result feels painful or out of your control, your instinct may be to cling tighter to what's familiar, i.e. your belongings, your routines, your past, and that makes the decluttering process more emotionally charged and you get way more resistance. On the other hand, if the result is hopeful, or if you can develop a hopeful outlook about it, which we'll get to here in a second, that same process might feel exciting or like a fresh start. So the third part of this emotional context is your outlook, the lens you're using to interpret the whole thing. You may not get to choose the situation, and you may not love or get to choose the result, but you can shape your outlook. The story could be, I'm losing everything, or I'm building something new. I'm getting a fresh start. It could be, I'm having to move back in with my parents, or I'm getting to spend time with my family. We're not trying to sugarcoat hard things, but it is helpful to reframe the things that are going to help you move forward, because your emotional outlook sets the tone for your actions, and it determines whether the work ahead feels empowering or completely defeating. When we overlook situational context, we can end up trying to declutter with only half the picture. We expect ourselves to just get it done without acknowledging the emotional terrain we're standing on, right? But once you name your situation and accept the result and reframe your outlook with compassion, the process gets lighter, not because the situation changes, but because you're better equipped to move through it. So now we know that clutter isn't just about stuff, it's about emotion, context, and what your brain expects is going to happen next. That's where the right tools come in. And we're not talking about physical tools like bins or labels, but emotional tools. And the most powerful one of all is having a proactive plan. And the most effective way to do that is by tapping into the science of if-then planning. This strategy is known in psychology as implementation intention. This is a term that was coined by researcher Peter Gallwitzer, I hope I said his name right, and his studies found that people who created very specific plans, like if X happens, then I'll do Y, are much more likely to follow through on difficult or emotionally loaded goals. Even simple intentions, like if I feel overwhelmed, I'll pause and drink a glass of water. If I feel guilty, I'll remind myself of why I started this whole process in the first place. These things, these little standards that you set before you even get started, give your brain a little bit of a script. It's like a fallback plan, and it gives you a sense of control, which, as we discussed earlier, makes you more emotionally resilient. There's a reason why people who make very specific, flexible plans tend to succeed more than those who just wing it all the time. And there's definitely a balance, again, action is action. You do want to take action and not spend all of your time planning. But if you have no plan or you're constantly winging it, then you're also kind of leaving yourself open to the emotional landscape of whatever is happening in your life. In one study from an orthopedic unit in Scotland, researchers tracked patients who were recovering from knee surgery. This is a notoriously painful and difficult recovery, and some patients were asked to write out small personal strategies for how they would respond when those setbacks arose. Not if, but when. And one person wrote, if I feel pain at the bus stop, I'll sit on the bench and drink my coffee. Those who made these kinds of concrete if-then plans recovered faster and were more consistent with their rehab exercises, not because they felt less pain than the other people, but because they had mentally rehearsed what to do when it happened. That's the same kind of emotional prep that we want for our decluttering. We're not pretending that resistance isn't going to come, or that we won't run into items that we're not sure about, or that we feel sentimental toward. We're expecting it. And we're planning on how to meet with compassion and not panic. So here's what a proactive plan might look like in some decluttering practices. You might anticipate emotional roadblocks, like, I know I get stuck on sentimental items. I'm going to start with a low emotional area like the bathroom just to build momentum. You might try naming your coping strategy, like, if I get stuck, I'm going to call a friend and I'm going to step outside for 5 minutes. Or you might try pre-deciding the meaning of things. Like, letting go doesn't mean that I didn't care. It means that I'm making room for what I need now. This kind of prep work on all of these different levels, it doesn't remove the emotion altogether, but it removes the surprise of the emotion. So you're not caught off guard when things feel sticky or hard. So letting go isn't always the hard part. not if you've prepared for what's underneath it. The real challenge in many cases is what keeps people from starting altogether. It's everything that comes before the physical action even happens. And that has to do with your emotional readiness, the context that is surrounding all of your clutter and the situation, and whether or not you've planned for any kind of resistance. And once you have those pieces in place, decluttering stops feeling like an uphill battle and it starts feeling more like clarity or more like relief and actual progress and momentum. So if you're tired of stopping and starting or getting hung all up in the emotions and never quite being able to follow through, I created something for you and it's called Clutter Cure. This is my signature step-by-step process for creating a home that feels clear and functional and fully supportive of your life. So we're not just purging the stuff, we walk through the emotional, situational, and practical blocks that keep you stuck. We go through mindsets, the emotions, the physical strategies, and even the habits and routines for maintaining your space when you're done. You can see all about it using the link down in the description. At that link, I break down the modules and everything that's in the program. And part of that is my plug and play decluttering plan. So that helps you to build that emotional awareness and a sustainable plan for moving forward. So you can click below to see all the details, and I'll chat with you next week.